So will you please join me in welcoming Don Bradman's son, John Bradman. Thank you. Great to see you.
Thanks, man. You better take them out. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike, for your kind introduction, and thank you for your enthusiastic introduction, or welcome rather. It reminds me of the last speech I heard my dear old dad give when he got an enthusiastic welcome like that. And he stood there and looked around in trepidation. He said, the last time I got a welcome like that, I only lasted for 2 balls. And I should follow his example and say, I hope I last longer tonight. I must comment that I sat down there and I looked up and I saw first my dear old dad. Talking about dear old dads, it's 12 years since he died, and I still miss him a great deal. And then I saw my very dear friend Keith, who I also love dearly. And then I saw that you've got my father next to Jardine, Douglas Jardine. And I thought the people at Lord's really do have a sense of humour. I wondered what, if you crept in here in the dark of night, I wondered what you'd hear them talking about. I can tell you the answer, it would be deathly quiet. Anyhow, it's lovely to be here with you. I'm delighted to be here to support the Britain Australia Society and its good causes, and delighted to be again at Lord's. I must tell you about my first visit to Lord's, which I remember very well and which made a really warm impression on me. I travelled to Britain as part of my recuperation from having polio. I was about Nicholas's age. My younger son Nicholas, who I'm absolutely delighted to say is here with us tonight, with his lovely mum Megan, and with 2 of her other children, Sarah and James. So we've come as a family group to be here, and we're delighted to be here. So I came to Lord's at that time, and I was brought by one R.W.V. Robbins, Robbie, Richard and Charles' father. And he brought me here to play not cricket, but royal or real tennis, which must be the most eccentric game ever devised. Great fun. And both were accentuated by the fact that throughout this game, it was punctuated by Robbie giving full-throated voice to extracts from the song Hello Dolly. And eventually he announced that the game was over and that he'd won. I was in absolutely no position to question him because I couldn't for the life of me work out what the rules were. We then made our way down to the changing rooms, and this wonderfully dignified little Englishman came up to me and said to me very confidentially, "Your bath is drawn, sir." And a very young sir proceeded to climb into the warmest tub and biggest tub of piping hot water he'd ever seen. And as I say, Lord's left a very warm impression on me, which has remained ever since. I should add to those remarks, in all seriousness, I was extremely fond of Robbie, and he was very good to me, very good to my sister. He was a wonderful friend to my family. My father wouldn't have come here in 1948, I'm sure, if it hadn't been for Robbie and the role he played. And on this occasion, I think it's a very appropriate time for me to pay tribute to him and to record my thanks. Now, on this occasion, I'm at Lord's to accompany and speak to the items from the Bradman collection, which are here on loan from the Adelaide Oval while the Oval is being redeveloped. The collection consists entirely of items from the Bradman family home, and so they are very much part of my family heritage. And on that basis, it gives me very great pleasure to be here with these Bradman collection items to bring greetings from the Adelaide Oval to Lord's and BAS, of course. Two places which my father very dearly loved. Now, I'll return to the question of these greetings, but first I'd like to make a couple of comments about the items in the collection. The one I want to talk about in particular, and I'm actually not sure if it's there, I've asked several people and they've all said, I'm not sure whether it's there, is a small brown scrapbook lovingly put together by his mother. Now, can we take a vote? Is it there? I'm very relieved. Thank you. We didn't get here in time to see, so I'm delighted that the scrapbook is there. It contains cuttings and materials from the time of my father's first tour of England in 1930. As this scrapbook shows, his achievements on that tour were absolutely extraordinary. And he was just 21. He was just hardly more than a boy. And even more extraordinary than his achievements were his amazing ability to keep his head and maintain his balance in the face of what was going on in response to what he was doing. It is truly quite remarkable, and of course my family, as others do, have enormous admiration for him. Now let me quickly look at some of the points that are made in that scrapbook about the 1930 tour. The tour effectively began, as Mike has rightly said, at Worcester. He'd been at sea for weeks, a good deal of the time seasick. He'd had 1 week in which to have a couple of knocks at the nets at Lord's to get some sense of what English wickets were like, and found them to be very slow and soft and quite different from what he'd been used to. He then went to Worcester for the first game and made 236 in 278 minutes. And the adulation was extraordinary, and there was pressure on him to celebrate and to be excited. But he was seen sitting quietly in front of the fire at the hotel, digesting and learning from the day's events. And his diary showed his reaction to it. It simply said, stiff and sore from running about. He then went to the next innings and made 185 not out. He then made several other scores that were more modest. He then went and played against Surrey and made 252 not out, the second 100 being in 80 minutes, which he confessed he relished because the captain of the Surrey side had written a book to say he wouldn't be any good on English wickets, which he clearly put to paid. Before the test matches, he'd made in 11 innings some over 1,000 runs at an average of 143. And the response to this was quite extraordinary. And as I say, it's remarkable that he kept his feet as he did. Then he came to the tests. In the first test, he made 131. I'm probably telling you things that you know all about, but anyhow, bear with me. In the first test, he made 131 when Australia was struggling, and he thought he might be able to get Australia through, until he was bowled by none other than R.W.V. Robbins. Now, Richard will tell you that this was a brilliant googly. In fact, my father let it go, and it bowled him from way outside the off stump. And the press reports vary, but they go so far as to say it was an unplayable grubber, and that obviously had hit something. Well, be that as it may, that was the first test. Then they came to the second test. Now, in this test, my father played under obvious inspiration, what was, he said, the best innings of his life. It was described in various reports in various ways, but essentially, as one of them said, as a mixture of poetry and murder. When you read his diary, I think the inspiration came from the fact that he'd been to a dinner at Grosvenor House just before the match. And as he writes in his diary with obvious awe, The distinguished gathering at the dinner included Dame Nellie Melba. Now, he loved the piano, but above all, he loved soprano voice. And there is no question that he was absolutely delighted and enthused by this meeting. And I must say, as is obvious, he would be absolutely delighted and immensely proud at Greta being here and singing to you all this evening, as proud as I am, if that's possible. Anyhow, he played this remarkable match, and as he has said, every ball went exactly where it meant to go, including the one that got him out by a couple of inches. It went like a rocket, skimming the grass, a tiny bit too close to Percy Chapman, who threw out the wrong hand and caught it right on the grass. And my father simply said in his diary that he made 254, and he says, "I was out to a freak catch by Percy Chapman." So he summarised the event. Just think, 254, he only needed another hour the way he was going, and it was 300. Then they came to the third test, to the most remarkable innings of his life. In the third test, before the third test, he hadn't held a bat for 9 days. He'd split the webbing in his hand, between his thumb and his forefinger, and split it very badly. He hadn't touched a bat for 9 days, and he recorded that he felt very underprepared. Now, this was 83 years ago yesterday that this game began. And it's interesting to see what his diary says. It sums it up. Beautiful day with just a nip in the air. Woodfull won the toss. We batted. Easy wicket. Archie out for 1. I followed, and at stumps was 309 not out. But everyone's celebrating and getting excited. For him, he finishes by saying, "To hotel in the evening for dinner, wrote letters, thence to bed." Got up the next morning and proceeded to finish the innings. The press was full of all sorts of stories about what he might make the following day. What they ignored was the fact that he was so sore, his hands were so sore that he struggled to grip the bat. He got up to 334, made in just 380 minutes, and was out, fair and square. That 309 was absolutely astonishing. The press reports show he hit just 2 balls in the air. Every other ball went along the ground exactly where he meant it to go, with rare exceptions. To round this off, in the 4th test, you had largely a washout because it rained, and the 5th test was also interrupted by rain. He was off and on a number of times. Eventually, he was out for 232. And he says, simply, made 232. I was given out, caught by Duckworth and Larwood for 232, but did not hit the ball. He was scrupulously honest. He was all the things that Mike said. If he said he didn't hit the ball, he didn't hit the ball. It's very interesting that people talk about his final duck and lament the fact that he didn't get 4 and get an average of 100. What about this innings? 232 given out when he was not out, and he was going like a train. So there was the additional 4. So in the tests, he made 974 runs, essentially in 4 innings, in 4 tests. It's interesting if you reflect on them. In the first one, he was bowled by an unplayable grubber. In the second one, he was caught by a freak catch. In the 4th one, he was given out when he was not out. Just think, he might have made a few runs if he'd had some luck. So it was extraordinary, absolutely astonishing results, and his response to it all, as is clear from reading the press reports, revealed all the sorts of qualities that Mike so eloquently expressed, and which I won't repeat. I must just mention a couple of the other vases. The Worcester vase is just the most exquisite vase of the Worcester Cathedral, and does reflect the fact that he made he started off 3 tours in a row with a score of 200, which is extraordinary. In 1948, his 4th tour, he made 100. I said to him, "Did you ever think of making another 200?" And he said, "No, I was 40. I had a lot of responsibility." And he said, I didn't dare risk that. And besides, as he said, I had a torn rib cartilage. And he played right through the 1948 tour with a torn rib cartilage at the age of 40. So that's what happened in that season. And you've also got the Warwick vase, which is a wonderful vase, the story of which I'm sure has been explained to you. So his achievements from 1930 in particular, but subsequently were remarkable. And I must say, as his family, we are immensely proud of him, immensely proud of his achievements, but more proud of the way in which he's dealt with the consequences of it all. Now, I said I'd come back to the question of the question of the greetings, which I brought with you. Just let me organise this errant English paper. Yes, as I said, I'm delighted to be here with the collection items to bring greetings from the Adelaide Oval to Lord's, including here, of course, BAS. My inspiration for doing this comes from my dad. As a member of Adelaide Rotary, he sent cricket-related greetings from the Adelaide Club to other clubs, not only, but especially in Britain. And I have no doubt that he would be absolutely delighted that with the collection I should bring greetings from the Adelaide Oval to Lord's, both of which places he dearly loved. So let me mention 2 of the greetings which he sent. The first was a greeting sent to the Cheltenham Club in Gloucestershire to honour the memory of that amazing cricketer. Those in the know would, of course, have it on the tip of their tongue, Gilbert Jessop, who was born there. And in sending this greeting, he recounted what he called Jessop's fabulous career, which included 53 centuries, scored at an average rate of 82.7 runs an hour, scored at the scoring rate of Hutton, sorry if there's any offence there, and Ponsford combined. And he added, and this was during an era when to score a 6, you had to hit the ball not just over the boundary, but right out of the ground. Not into the pavilion, but over it. That was his first greeting. And the second greeting is my favourite, and I suspect it was also his. This greeting is to the club of Weston-super-Mare in Somerset. And this greeting, my dad said, is to, quote, indicate that we appreciate the unpretentious people as well as those that get the headlines, a sentiment very dear to him. The area of this club was the birthplace of a Mr. Clark. Now, this is not to be confused with the Mr. Clark presently playing in England, and there is certainly no parallel to be drawn between their results, at least we loyal Aussies would hope so. This is a Mr. Clark who batted for Somerset in 1930, the year of my dad's remarkable tour of England. Mr. Clark was on the very bottom, and my dad described his 1930 performances as follows. He played 5 first-class matches, batted 9 times, and his scores were a pair of ducks, followed by a pair of ducks, followed by, and here his performance improved, 0 not out and 0 not out, which was followed by a pair of ducks, and finally a duck. One bowler, trying to give him a start, bowled the ball so gently that it bounced twice before it reached the wicket. and still bowled him. My dad further pointed out that his highest score before playing for Somerset was 3, of which 2 were overthrows. And in his entire career, he played 250 innings and never once reached double figures. Nevertheless, he received my dad's greetings. And so you can see that it is in the most inclusive spirit that in conjunction with the items from the Bradman collection, I bring the warmest greetings from the Adelaide Oval to Lords and BAS. And I thank you for listening to me.